Or hello, everyone. I'm Leslie Cornwell, certified nurse midwife with Midwifery Business Consultation. I have Fran Schwartz here, who has been an amazing connection I got the last few months. She's a wealth of knowledge when it has to do with the business side of running successful birth centers across the country. Fran, if you want to tell a little bit about yourself and your history with midwifery.
Sure. I've been involved in the business side of running maternity providers for decades. I started out in running OBGYN businesses back from my husband is an OBGYN. And so he and his partners approached me to actually, instead of being consultant, to start to work as a permanent employee for them. And so I was an executive director for 13 years in the largest OBGYN practice in the tri-state area. It started out very small, a couple of providers, and I expanded it into 5 locations: office-based surgery, radiology, everything that could come under one-stop shop for women who, especially introducing midwifery and allowing women choice and option to have midwives. In Brooklyn, New York, which is where I was working, there was in the 90s, there wasn't that much available, and so I kind of introduced it and made that happen. And then thereafter, I really decided that women still don't have enough choice and access, and wanted and ran the Brooklyn Birthing Center, which is the only birthing center in New York that's fully licensed and accredited, other than one up in Buffalo, and worked there for 3 or 4 years, which was an amazing experience in learning all about birth centers. And then from there, I opened my own consulting business to basically consult around the country for birth centers and help them develop, for developing birth centers, established birth centers. And I have a background. My original career was in law. I was a lawyer and in real estate, and basically for years I was doing that. And then when I moved to New York, I kind of picked up on the healthcare management side and just ran with that. So I'm really happy to be here and talk to you and try to see where people have need for what kind of services that they can that I can assist them with in mainly the goal being to proliferate birth centers, really.
Yeah, I think you've got a very unique experience just in life and the direction. I mean, how many attorneys go to running birth centers successfully across the country? So it tells you have a deep, deep heart for women empowerment. So thank you for supporting midwifery in your direction. I wish we had more people that were accountants, lawyers, real estate investors that understood the power of midwifery and supporting these business models. So I think with your unique perspective and everything I've learned from you the last couple of months, I had quite a few questions from past clients, from comments on some past videos. People don't really understand the core difference between AABC, CABC, when you would get resources from one, when you're going through the accreditation process. And I know you've been on the board for AABC for many years, so I'd love for you to expand on that.
Sure. So while I was a executive director of the birth center, I got very involved in the leadership of the AABC, and I was elected as a board member, and I was chair of industry relations and chair of bylaws, and I worked on the standards committee. So I was really entrenched in understanding and wanting for people to use the AABC and CABC's resources, because they're just, it's phenomenal organizations that can help us. So the AABC, the American Association of Birth Centers, is a national trade organization, which means that the members are midwives and birth centers and proponents of birth centers. The standards, in order to be an AABC member, you basically have to say, look, I agree that the standards promulgated by the American Association of Birth Center are accepted by me, and that I agree with the fact that these standards are the best practices that we all need to together to follow. And in that, when the separate agency of the Commission of Accreditation of Birth Centers is a separate agency that that accredits. It's like very familiar, if people are familiar with hospitals, they understand JACA. So it's a independent agency, and it has the opportunity to accredit, to approve a birth center as being, as being a birth center of good quality and good practice and protocols, in adopting standards that they use for the accreditation. In doing so, they determined that the American Association of Birth Center standards were the perfect best practices to use. And so the CABC adopted the AABC standards for accreditation. It's quite confusing because we think of them as the same organization, and they are not. There's a third organization, which is the AABC Foundation. And the foundation is actually the arm of where funds come through a nonprofit foundation that supports birth centers, supports American Association of Birth Centers. So scholarships and other vehicles to help midwives, and birth centers open. For instance, the foundation provides for any birth center that wants accreditation, it subsidizes their application for accreditation. So it's a really important arm of AABC in order to give funds to birth centers and midwives that, especially midwives of color, that we want to expand opportunities for women of color and Black and women of color and diversity. So BOIPC, there's a huge push to try and, of course, integrate as many possible opportunities for underserved and having a diverse birth centers. So those are the three separate organizations. Now, in some states, you can, like in Florida, you can either be licensed by the state, or you could do the accreditation process, and then you wouldn't have to do that. The accreditation process would be acceptable in lieu of licensing. That would be also true for Minnesota, that has accreditation in lieu of. So that's a way for some states that are now adopting new model regulations for birth centers to use the CABC as an agency that can provide the oversight for the state or through their standards in order for birth centers to be accepted and licensed for use by the public, because the states always have an interest in care that's given to the public, that it should be safe, secure, and financially sustainable, and so forth. So there are safeguards that both come through CABC, being a member of AABC, and of course, the state licensing.
Wow. And I think it's overwhelming. Just like we think of midwifery, there's so many types of midwives, there's so many educations, there's so many state regulations. You don't anticipate when you're like, okay, I went through the professional hoops of figuring out who I am, where I'm going to be. Now you've got to go through the professional hoops of the business structure and the knowing your state, knowing the accreditation process, knowing your resources. It's so confusing. If someone's listening to this right now and has the love of dream, they're in midwifery school, they want to start a birth center, where would be a great place for them just to start, kind of just tap into the resources in the learning process?
Well, I mean, first you have to kind of pick the state. And if you have the luxury of picking which state you want to open a birth center in, then I would look, of course, to see where there are, you can tell in some states there are many birth centers like Texas, California, and Florida. That would mean to you that it might be a little easier to open in those states, depending on the state regulations. North Carolina, so there are states that are more friendly toward opening birth centers, and some are more difficult. New York is a very difficult state because there are 7 states, 12 states, I'm not sure now how many, that have certificate of need requirements, which are a barrier to opening birth centers because of the cost of doing that process. And so you really need to look at, what is it that you're going, which state? And then secondly, are you building a birth center? Are you renovating a birth center? Are you renting a birth center? All of those 3 will determine the kind of finances that you're going to need in order to open a birth center. Thirdly, are you going to be nonprofit or are you going to be a for-profit? So that's a decision that needs to be made. And then fourthly, you would determine whether you have a midwifery group as separate. Is it a closed birth center, open birth center, hybrid? And who's going to be your feeder for midwives to be able to come into the birth center, bring their clients or birth the clients at the birth center, have a closed staff. So those are the decisions that need to be made in order to determine all of these decisions, determine your finances and determine your, your business model. And lastly, of course, is you have to know whether your reimbursement is going to sustain your business model. Without having the reimbursement, are you going to depend on self-paying patients? Are you going to take Medicaid? Are you going to do HMO? What type of clientele? Who's your population, and what are they willing to pay? And what is the going rate? So if the going rate is not enough for insurance reimbursement, then you have to have a percentage of self-paying patients who are willing to pay. And these are the considerations you would take, you would look into in order to determine whether a birth center is a viable option for you to do as a business opportunity.
Well, and I think that redirects to what you and I have been very good at, and I am definitely in the early stages of what you've been doing for so long, but hiring a birth center consultant, hiring someone that can help you with the business planning. There's a reason it takes a couple years to average open a birth center. You don't just pick out the location and what you want on the walls. You want the business structure, the market analysis, okay, for-profit, nonprofit, like these things tend to be so foreign to midwives because we aren't trained to be business owners. And so I've had a lot of fun, and I'm sure you have, the inspiration, the analysis. I mean, when I'm working one-on-one with a consultant, it takes an average of 3 to 6 months to even just get the bones of their business plan created, because there's so many components to think about. You don't know exactly which services to offer because you don't know the reimbursement, you don't know the regulations. They're all so intertwined. So yeah, I definitely think starting with just learning about birth centers, maybe having a birth center workshop, learning your resources in the area, like you're talking about, birth center consultants like yourself and myself are just great resources to help you, because every place is different. We can't say cookie cutter, this is what you do across the whole country, and for your scenario, it's not realistic. So if you want to go down the direction of like AABC would kind of explain more the direction of the planning stages. CABC in my mind is more towards the tail end, like the accreditation process. You're now got your policies, you got your clinical guidelines. Like if you want to break down when AABC is more utilized versus CABC.
Sure. So AABC is a continual support system, right? So you become a member, hopefully, and then you have available a tremendous amount of resources and through the AABC. While most people look at CABC as, a ladder kind of concern, I actually impress upon my clients that you should get into CABC, getting accredited very quickly. In other words, you have 2 options. You can get accredited for a 3-year term, a permanent license, permanent accreditation for 3 years. But there's another vehicle for new birth centers, which is important because in many situations, you can't do a lot of things unless you are accredited. Just a perfect example, in most states, Anthem won't sign a contract with you for insurance reimbursement unless you are accredited. So you can do a 1-year licensing process where well, today we don't have site inspections exactly right now, but you apply and you have everything ready to go to open your birth center. You have all your practice protocols, your furniture, everything is all set, everything is done. Then at that time, you can have CABC review everything, your practice protocols, everything, and they will give you, if you conform, they'll give you a 1-year license. And then at the end, the reason that you're not getting a permanent license is because they really need to see your charts and your patients and how you're taking care of your quality of the care you're giving, and they can't do that until you've actually been in business for a period of time. So they'll come back in at the end of the year, review your charts, check how everything's going, and then they can give you a 3-year permanent license. So it's a 2-step process instead of a 1-step process. But I encourage every new birth center to start. That's part of your process of opening. You really should be able to, do that up front and get that done. And that will help you a lot, both in licensing if you need it, as well as insurance, as well as recognition, credibility, safety, all those things that are what the public wants to see, that you're held to the best gold standards of what a birth center can achieve.
I can't say how much I appreciate your knowledge and expertise. I was like, it's serendipitous that you were going to be interviewing with me. And I was like, oh, I've got so many lists of topics, and your knowledge and wealth this direction is so important. And especially when I talk to you about, okay, you're a birth center consultant, you have this knowledge, you know the insurance side ins and outs. So I would love for you to stress about what people can go to you for, because I know my insurance questions I've already come to you with, which states are good, which ones aren't. If someone's considering opening a birth center, when should they connect with you in the planning process in the insurance side?
Well, if you're opening a birth center, I get involved very early on, before you've opened the birth center. So for instance, I'm working with a new developing birth center in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's not open yet, but we need to prep up a lot of preparation, and needs to be done in order to make sure that things are done well. I really do help both established and developing birth centers, and through all processes that they encounter, whether it's financial or advice on marketing or accreditation. I've done plenty of accrediting, site visits. But of course, I think that the hardest and the most intimidating process of owning a birth center is the insurance reimbursement. And just being unfamiliar with the idea, how do I do this? How do I get a contract? What do I expect to see in this contract? What am I supposed to look for? And what will it provide me enough, to accept the population, the members that are under that insurance company? So you really need to know what the market is about, which insurers are in your market, and who your clients, which insurances your clients that come to you are covered. What are their coverage, and how do you reach out to those insurance companies and get somewhere with contracts? So if you're in a state that already has contracts, or in a region, I should say, that has contracts, then you're probably going to be just offered whatever somebody else has already signed on to. Generally, they've signed on to something that's low reimbursement, unfortunately, and that becomes a standard that we all have to end up fighting against in most states, because of course we're not reimbursed sustainable rates almost anywhere. And so that's a key point in being able to sustain yourself. So the problem is, in a state that doesn't have birth centers and you're the first, well, you're going to be stuck doing the first contract. It's going to take a long time first to find somebody who's going to be understanding of what a birth center is. And most insurance companies really don't want to bother with you, because it's only a couple of members that are really affected. And unless you cry, yell, and scream at them, they're not going to listen to you because they don't care that they're not able to accommodate just a few of their members and don't have the knowledge necessary to understand that the savings and the better outcomes is what women need access to, and insurance companies need to be able to benefit from lower cost and higher patient satisfaction. So there's a lot that goes on in that insurance, back and forth with insurance companies, and it really is a persistent, process that needs a tremendous amount of commitment to accomplish. So I try to help birth centers that are going through that process, or I just take it on myself for them. I've been able to probably achieve better rates than most would be able to maybe do it on their own, possibly. And also, there's a huge fallacy that I think birth centers just don't understand, that when it comes to Medicaid managed care, I know our birth centers are looking to take on more Medicaid. Most of them can't because the reimbursement is just too low. So most of our birth centers are only taking between 15 to 25%, if they're taking at all, Medicaid. So unless they're a big birth center and so forth. And so what they need to know is that it's not Medicaid fee for service, it's Medicaid managed care. And so you can negotiate. You do not have to accept a contract that is just that is the fee for service that's listed and published in the Medicaid. You need to look at what you can achieve in a higher reimbursement than the fee for service, or you may not or should not be signing contracts. So that's kind of my tip for the day.
Yeah, I love that one.
Don't accept what you get. Right. Don't accept just what they want to give you. Make sure you push to get what you deserve.
No, I think that's a great way to end, to really just push when you're talking about the example of the standards, if you're the first one in the area, you have a lot of pressure on you to set the negotiate well, because it may make for future birth centers a challenge hurdle to go through. So no, I think that's great advice, and knowing you can negotiate with Medicaid as managed versus this is a contract and this is the way it is. So if people want to get a hold of you, Fran, can you please tell us about your business, your contact information, is email, whatever way to communicate with you?
Sure. So I have a company, Integral Healthcare for Women, and you can reach me at fschwartz@integralhealthcare.com. And my number is 917-282-6515. I'll be very upfront if I've worked in your state and what I've done, and so that I can offer you opportunity maybe that you haven't thought of, or what you need to do. So I'm always happy to share what I know. My mission in life is to increase birth centers that are accredited, especially, and to help midwives understand the business of birth centers, as well as business owners who want to venture into buying and selling their birth center. So I'm always available, I think, to give you direction, if not able to actually take on a consulting job, depending on what you're looking to do.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your time today, Fran. I hope I learned lots from you, as always. So I appreciate your time and your knowledge. I'll put your contact information underneath the video as well. And I look forward to hopefully having you on again in a few months, and we can see if more questions come up from the comments people would like to learn from you.
Great. It's been such a pleasure, and I wish everyone a tremendous amount of luck in working towards birth centers, and only good health and and safe mommies and babies.
Well, have a great day, Fran.
Thanks.
Thank you.